So today we're going to go through some of the cities you read about in the Old Testament and the New Testament, because it took me years to get in my head, like, where are we? Where is Galilee? Where is Nazareth? I could never see the map in my head. So I think it's helpful for people when they say, okay, so just if you imagine a block like this, we're up here in the north today, or we're down here in the south today. And then when it was up here, it used to be called this, but then over a couple thousand years, it changed to this name. But it's the same area of land, right? I just think that's so helpful. Where in the world are we? And especially when you look at it, when you're reading the Old Testament, you see Jesus walked from this town to this town, you think, wow, it must have taken a while. And then you go, oh, yeah, that was 2.3 miles. And
there were no cars back then, folks.
But it's just so helpful. Okay, when they walked from here to here, how far was that? Mm-hmm. And how long did it take to go that far? It's just like, put some places in perspective. Where are we when we move through Bible study? Mm-hmm. Where are we? Right. Sometimes I get lost there. Like, all of a sudden we're talking about something. It was like in the town of Samaria. I'm like, oh, where is that again?
Right. Well, I think it's crucially important in any kind of study to kind of understand what you're looking at, because I think a lot of people come at a new topic or a story or history in general from an outsider's perspective, and then they're like, oh, yeah, but then they don't actually know what the geography of the situation looks like. You know, we're studying wars or when we're studying any of that, and it's like, oh, yeah, no, they had to, like, hoof it, you know. It's not just like, oh, we went for a stroll or something like that.
That was a long haul without cars,
right?
Without horses. It was a long haul. So I just went back and I looked around, like 5-6 different places you hear about in the Bible, and try to create a sense of perspective for you. So if you start with Moses, and where does he make the covenant with God? Where is Sinai? So I had to look it up, like, where is Sinai? Sinai is actually in Egypt. So when he's pulling 1.5 million roughly people out of Egypt, he never left the country of Egypt before he was up on the mountain talking to God and receiving the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. So Sinai is not actually in Israel, it's in Egypt. And if you think about it, what was Moses? Well, basically he was Egyptian. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when he hauls all these people out of here, and just imagine the logistics of this. Okay, I've been there for a long time, and then I left, and I came back, and look at this big motley crew. They're from all over. You don't move very far with that many people. Just imagine goats and horses and people and carts.
Having to drag all your stuff.
Yeah, so they didn't drag all their stuff very far before he had that Abrahamic covenant on Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. So if you can imagine Egypt in your head, just go, as I look north-south, I'm just going to go slightly east of Egypt before we have that covenant made. Didn't go too far. Mm-hmm. When you think about that, and then if you can imagine the peninsula like this, so here's Egypt, there's the Nile, here's Mount Sinai, and then they went way south like this, and then no wonder it took 40 years, about 1.5 million people, and they keep having kids on top of that. Now there's even more. And then there's this really huge, long journey. Mm-hmm. So when you keep that in perspective, and when they go from Egypt down, go over here to Sinai, and then they start working their way down, mm-hmm. they end up down at the bottom where we had Ur. Well, who else did we find down there? Who was down there? Ur of the Chaldeans.
You stumped me.
Adam and Eve.
Oh, right.
So you go to the very bottom
You're going
of the
back
peninsula.
To the beginning. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
We're just going back to the beginning. Okay.
So you guys kind of got lost. I'm going to take you back to the beginning, mm-hmm. and we're going to start again. Now you're going to start your journey up.
Start your journey over again. Okay.
Here we go. We're going to reset the clock here, people.
Thinking about the 40 years of, like, and God being like, all right, you guys need to start over 40 years of exile, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, aw, you know. But really, they're a nomadic people, right, back then. Everyone was kind of just wandering all the time anyway. It's not like it is today. And so for them to just be traveling around and having their families and living their life, for me it was always like, oh wow, that must have really sucked having to be in the desert for 40 years, you know. But thinking about what their culture was actually like, I think that was pretty normal. I mean, yeah, they'd been in captivity or you know, there was a lot of captivity and then freedom and then captivity and freedom, but it was very similar to their you know, already established lifestyle. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't as big a deal as we make it out to be.
Well, for us, like, oh, we gotta, like, especially having been in the military, we got to break camp and then set up camp somewhere else. Now we got to break camp and set up camp somewhere else. What you're saying is that was their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. For us, it's an inconvenience. For most of them, they were wandering shepherds.
Right.
You know, we just break down your tent, pick it up, move it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting when they end up in big cities. because that's a change. If you go from a very
Yeah.
nomadic lifestyle to a big city, it's a change. So I'll take the next big place that you hear about is Jericho. So you're going down here, we're going down along this peninsula. We're back where we started down in Ur. We start moving our way back up to the east, and you get to the city of Jericho, which is where we have the story of Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and that's where the people went around the city 7 times. And there's that number 7 again,
Right.
the number of completeness and wholeness. Well, why would you want Jericho? Well, God told Abraham, I'll give you the land of Canaan, right? So they're moving along, and Moses moves on, we're going to the promised land, and Moses doesn't get to cross over. But Joshua picks up the leadership, and he says, okay, we're going to Canaan, and right there, across the River Jordan, we have the Jericho, which is a fortified city. So you get used to being out in the country, right? And you see this big city. Now, if you're them, you're like, whoa, look how tall that thing is.
Yeah, that's huge.
We'll never get up that.
How are we going to defeat them?
Yeah, we're just a bunch of warriors who get mobilized.
Right.
That's why we keep counting the heads. We're going to count them again. How many people do you have? You people give us 27,000. That tribe over there, you give us 15,000. You keep counting the heads. But if you're them and you look at this big city, it's just imagine the first time you've been to Seattle and you're from Boise, Idaho. Or you're from Melba.
Yeah. Morsing.
But if you're them and all of a sudden you come up on us, so we're going to cross the River Jordan. And now we cross the River Jordan, which, by the way, is 233 miles long. I was thinking like the Boise River is what I was thinking.
You're like, oh, what a nice little stream.
The Jordan River goes, if you go north-south, it covers it touches 5 different large countries. So it's 233 miles long. And we're going to cross this river, which is a huge undertaking. With all these people and their cattle and their sheep and all this, we're going to cross the undertaking. And you hit the Jericho, the fortified city. In fact, it was so wide that there was a lady in there when Joshua sent the spies over. There was a lady who had a house in between the walls. That's how wide the walls, the 2 layers of walls were. She had her house built in between the 2 walls. Now, if you're them, this seems unsurmountable, which is why when he sent his spies out, most of them went like, yeah, it's not happening. And 2 of them said, yeah, we can do this. But the rest of them they come back, yeah, it's not happening.
No. Sorry, man. It's a no-go from me.
And it was so high that when the tribal men who get in there and then they get taken in by, and sometimes she's called, unfortunately, sometimes she's called a prostitute, and then sometimes she's just called an innkeeper. But when she hides them, she has to lower them down the wall. So you have to lower them down on ropes because this wall is so high. Just that would have been to them just, wow, that is huge. I don't know how we're going to do that. How do you knock down 20-foot walls?
Right. Which 20 feet, I mean, for us isn't that big. But once again, if you're nomadic people who live in tents to a 20-foot high stone wall, it's like, okay.
Gonna climb over there and clear everybody out. But it's just interesting. And they brought those walls down because they marched around them for 7 days. And there's that number again, 7, the number of completeness. It would be interesting. The ruins are still there to see how long that march was for the people walking around the city. How long was that march? And they did it for 7 days straight, making all this noise. That would be fascinating. But the other thing that comes out of the city of Jericho is Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was in the city of Jericho, and he was a tax collector. So in the Old Testament, we have the city of Jericho, and they captured it and took it over. And then go forward in time, and it's Jesus encounters Zacchaeus there in the city of Jericho. So he's like, sometimes some of the cities you hear in the Old Testament don't come forward in the New Testament, or their name has changed, but this one still bears the same.
Still there, yeah.
Same there. It was built on top of it, and that's where he held a dinner for Jesus, and everybody was shocked.
Right.
Because you are having dinner with him.
Tax collector.
He's collecting money for the Romans.
Exactly.
Did you know that?
He's a no good, nasty, insert bad word.
And the other cool thing about Jericho is it's not too far from the Dead Sea. So if you're that people and most of your history is oral history, you don't have to read to know that bad things happened around the Dead Sea. Because what are one of the bad things that happened around this Dead Sea? Well, let's go back to Abraham again. Abraham and Lot. And what cities were near the Dead Sea? Sodom and Gomorrah.
Our 2 favorite towns.
So it's just for them, all these cities would have had so much history. Because for us, we have no concept. Where is this? Where is this? Where is this? But for them, if they're nomadic people, they go from this town to trade and this town to trade. And like Mary walks to see her cousin. They walk these hills. They walk these miles. To them,
they know exactly.
Yeah, they can see it in their mind's eye. They can see the terrain, and we can't. That's why trying to pull some things. Okay, we heard about this. Heard about Jericho over here. We heard about it over here. Heard about it in the Old Testament, Abrahamic covenant, and then we see it again, and Jesus is the fulfillment of the 6th covenant. We hear about it again. Just kind of pull them forward. And then some of them are going to change names, but that's one that didn't change names. So here's another one that really threw me off, which is indicative of the fact that I should have been studying the Bible earlier than I was. But when you look at it, we had the 12 tribes of Israel finally moved into the land of Canaan, right? They moved into the land of Canaan.
Woohoo, we made it.
Yay, it took us a whole long time to get here. And then it's
Grandpa's dead, but we made it. Sorry, Grandpa.
2 whole generations made it through there.
It.
But they finally make it into the land of Canaan. So if you can see it in your mind's eye, that 233-mile Jordan River like this. They finally cross over it. They take the city of Jericho. And that's kind of a stronghold. So it's like to them, in the military, if you take this stronghold, then you just take a deep sigh of relief. Because the people around there are probably going to cave. They're going to run away. They're just going to say, please come on in and we'll make a peace treaty, right? So we took the big fortified city. Now we can keep spreading out like this across it. So they were able to move up and down. But they moved into the land of Canaan. So where do we get Canaan from? Where do you hear that one before?
Like,
go way back. Way back.
Well, like Cain and Abel? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Close. Oh, you're so close.
Oh, okay.
So Canaan is named after the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that goes way back because that's another covenant, right? Abraham was told, you're going to move into the land of Canaan. Where did that one come from? Go back to the Noah covenant. So those two get tied together. You're going to get the land that was the land of Noah's grandson. And why do you guys get it? Because they really screwed it up.
We need, once again, I'm trying to restart on this one.
Yeah, I gave the land after the flood and the waters receded, and Noah had kids, and his grandson takes over. His son Ham, his son Canaan, that land is named after him. And the Canaanites had really wandered far away from God. So it's almost like God saying, okay, now I need you to go back and reclaim the land that I gave them a long time ago. You reclaim it and cleanse it in my name. Clean it.
That makes sense.
So you go back to the land of Canaan, because part of you is saying, well, that was part of the Israelite people. No, not really. No, not really. Because you have to go back to where did that one come from? Israel and Jacob. So that was pre-Jacob. That was pre those people. So that covenant hadn't quite been made yet. But when you think about that, if you're a follower of Jesus and you've heard this oral history your whole life, oh, those are bad people. People in Canaan are bad people. They're still bad people. Even though the territory had changed hands many, many times, it was still that part of what they now called Israel was still not a good place.
Right. There's still this fear that is kind of settled in the people, and it's like, well, this is your promised land. It's like, I don't want that promised land. I
don't want to go there.
I don't want to go. Why would I go there?
Yeah, and it's also the same country that Canaan, where Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery.
Okay.
So if you're them, like really good, not good things happen there. Like my brother sold me into slavery to the Egyptians, and we were trying to get away from the Egyptians. Like, you sold me into slavery over there.
I had to go back.
Yeah. So it's just really interesting, and they estimate that Abraham's covenant with God was probably made in the Canaan region. So when you think about that, it's got a lot of history attached to it. Not much of it good from their perspective, but it plays a powerful part for them because I want you to go back and reclaim that land. Please claim the land in my name. So that one has a lot of history to it.
Yeah. Sorry, y'all. I'm getting an education. I didn't have much to say.
But it is interesting. So the other one that's interesting too is when you take that land. So originally it wasn't owned by them. So Abraham went up there, he settled it, and they spread out, and they did bad things. But by the time the 12 tribes come back to this and they divide it up, it doesn't stay as one big country that we call Israel now, right? It gets divided into 2 countries.
Okay.
So the 12 tribes just couldn't get along. The kingdom, the Davidic kingdom lasted, I think, less than 400 years. So the tribes to the north become Israel, and the tribes to the south become Judah. And you see, all you have to do is read through Chronicles, and you start to see how quickly people fell away from the faith, how quickly they fell away from the Jewish traditions and the Jewish faith. And that's why you get a divided kingdom, and we have Judah in the north, and we have Israel in the south. Well, interestingly enough, Judah in the north eventually holds at that same time, the same name hasn't changed, Samaria. So when you think about that, up in the north, they split away. They fell away from God's teaching. Down in Judah, they tried to stay with limited success. Faithful. But over in the north, we've got Samaria. And you're like, now if you're down in the south part, like, the people in the north, man, they're bad. Like, what used to be up in the north, Canaan. Okay, right. What's up there now, Samaria? Like, these people
Is it much better? No.
But it's just so interesting. So when it split like that, Jerusalem is down in Judah. Bethlehem is down in Judah. Bethlehem is the city of David. What do you get out of Bethlehem? You get David. What do you get out of Bethlehem? You get Jesus. But you don't have to go very far before you cross over that imaginary boundary, and all of a sudden you're in the land of Judah, and what do you get in there? Samaria. So I could never quite understand why it was such a really big deal that Jesus goes to where? Samaria.
Oof.
And the disciples
the no-go zone.
Yeah, and the disciples are like, we're not really going in there, are we? No, we're not going in there. We're going to go around it, right? And
Jesus is like, no.
You guys, we're going in. Because to them, those were the Jews who went bad. You're not even really Jews anymore.
Right. There was that huge separation between peoples in like every degree that you can think about. I mean, we think we have division now.
Yeah, and they know that the people in Samaria no longer went to the temple to pray. They had their own mountain, their own temple. They had their own rituals and everything. So for Jesus to go in there, it's like being the total turncoat. Right. You are not going in there to talk to those people, are you? They need to be smited by God. There needs to be wailing and gnashing of teeth. That's what needs to happen. There needs
to be a blue banana peel from heaven.
You're not going to talk to them. And then, so what does Jesus do? Cross over the imaginary boundary between Judah and Israel, and he goes straight into this place that had wandered so far away from God. They actually had their own practices now, and they had their own mountain.
Yeah,
like
made their own kind of
and
denomination.
So he goes in and he goes to talk, and he talked to the Samaritan woman. So now we're adding insult to injury. Number one, they're not good Jews, and we're not even going to say they're Jews anymore.
No. Number two, it's a woman.
It's a woman.
You don't talk to women.
We don't talk to women.
You silly Willy.
So when Jesus goes in and he talks to this woman in Samaria, so if you can see the map in your head, it's like just slightly above halfway. Just slightly above halfway. He goes in and he talks to her and tells her story. And then she goes out and she'll tell all the other Samaritans, and they want him to stay. Now just imagine being one of the disciples right now. Number one, I didn't want to go into Samaria in the first place. Number two, you talk to a woman, and now all these Samaritans want to come talk to us, and they want us to stay in the city. What
we don't want to hang out with them.
Doing?
That's funny. They're all sitting there like throwing a fit, all pouty. Gosh dang it, Jesus.
And then when you go north of what would have been Samaria, so now here's the halfway mark. Here's Jerusalem. Here's the Dead Sea over here and the River Jordan. Now I'm up here in Samaria. Now I have to go north. But if I had skirted around Samaria, I could have had an easy trip back to where Jesus came from, which is Galilee. But I had to go through Samaria to get back home now. So it's just interesting that when Jesus chose to be born and be part of Galilee, because where was that? That was the part of the kingdom that were bad people. Like, you guys got carried into Babylon for a reason, because you people are terrible.
Right.
But where did he chose to be born in the southern part of Judah, so he's the Lion of Judah. But where did he settle after they left Egypt? The northern part. You talk about trying to unify a country that had been divided in half.
Yeah.
I'm going to be born down here because the prophecy says this, City of David, Lion of Judah. But I'm going to have to make sure we get up there. And God, of course, orchestrates all this. But you're going to go to the top of what used to be a united kingdom. I'm going to go to the top of it and then work my way back down.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really cool to see how like meticulously thought out every single decision of Jesus was. You know, you just kind of read the New Testament and you're like, oh, so like he was going all over the place and preaching and teaching to the peoples and trying to, you know, start his church. But then it's like, no. Everything culturally was kind of a mess, and so he had to do things a very specific way, and that actually ties into one of the reasons why we believe he came specifically as a man as compared to a woman, right? Is because no one listens to a woman, right? We've established that we don't talk to women. We don't look at women, right? And so for him to come as a man and then treat women a specific way, and then the Gentiles a specific way and the Samaritans a specific way, it was like a huge act of unity. And that's, you know, once again, that's where we get Catholic from. So
when he's going from back up to Galilee, he's going through Gentile territory.
Yeah.
So the Gentiles, they're not Jews, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's going directly into bad people territory because I came for everybody. Mm-hmm. And then he winds up here. So we hear all the stories of Capernaum and Galilee. So it's very intentional. I'm going to go to the places where you guys thought you were going to see me. I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go up here and work my way down. And to leverage off your point about why did Jesus had to be a man, because a woman would not have been allowed to wander around like that and preach and teach, unless she was a Roman citizen, but these are Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Jewish women didn't travel by themselves. You didn't talk to other people. Mm-hmm. But it is very fascinating. Like, I had to think back about what good things come out of Nazareth. So if you're from Jerusalem, the heart where the temple is and everything, like, oh, those people up there, like, oh,
those are the poor.
Those are the poor people. They probably smell.
Yeah.
They speak bad Hebrew. Man, did you hear that guy?
They're garbage people.
But it's just so fascinating. He goes up to find all the poor people, all the people the rest of them, like, not only that, he lived there for a while.
Yeah.
I lived up there. I grew up there. I worked there. I know these people. These are my people too. Mm-hmm. These are my people too. And you people down here, you people down in the center of the country, you got lost. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come talk to you too, because you got lost. You think you're on top of this, but you're not.
Yeah. You need to sort out your priorities.
Yeah. Just fascinating. But and then I looked at a couple other places, because it's been hard for me to try to get my head wrapped around exactly where we are in some of these stories, because it'll change names. Right. So it took me a little while, and it's indicative of my lack of understanding. Judah and Judea are the same thing. You're like, of course they are, Maureen. Okay, I did not know that.
I didn't know that. Don't look at me. You're educating me here.
But when you look at those kind of things, the names changed and who owned them changed. So the temple was destroyed 3 different times. So the second time it was destroyed, it was always built in Jerusalem, and they carried those people to Babylon, right? Mm-hmm. So Babylon is on the other side of the Jordan River. So we'll always know that on the other side of the Jordan River are more bad people and more pagans. So what you're talking about, insult to injury. Mm-hmm. So we get hauled out of the holy city, Jerusalem, here, and we get pulled over here. We crossed over the river that we got to because God gave us this land, and now we're going way over there. And Babylon has been around for a long time, because we think about the Tower of Babel, right? Same kind of place. And Babylon is in the modern city of Iraq. But if you get hauled away across the Jordan River, now you just literally get pulled across the river where Jesus was baptized and where people were baptized, and you had to cross this to get to the Holy Land. Now you're getting dragged all the way across that. It's like getting the final slap.
Right.
Took you 40 years to get up here and cross, and I'm going to drag you back over here. And you're going to have to work your way back over there. Mm-hmm. So where did they get dragged away to? Some of them got dragged away to Egypt. Don't want to go to Egypt either, right?
Egypt again. Gosh dang it.
So some of them got pulled away to Egypt when the second fall, and then some get pulled over here. But when you think about that, now I'm so far away. If you're them, you can't even imagine how you're going to get back.
Yeah.
So Nebuchadnezzar, what do you do to really divide a people? You pull them completely out of their homeland. Mm-hmm. You're completely out of their history, because they would have been set in the mind, God promised this land to us, God promised this land to this, and all of a sudden it's gone. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to really want it to go back.
Well, yeah, and to have to get over the fear of of that idea. You know, like all these people had gone through so much, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Promises made, covenants made, and all of this is based on faith. I mean, for me, reading the Bible, and it's like, and God said to Moses, you know, and it's like, we don't really know what that looks like. Like, I don't really feel like we know if it was very much like you and I, and God was like, hey, Moses, you know, or was it like a Holy Spirit message, you know, like through his heart, and he was just like following the voice of what he thought the Holy Spirit was saying, or what was that like? So all of this is based on faith, and they're moving millions of people around, and you're telling like thousands of families to follow you. And so when you're having all of this just being ripped out of your home and everything, it's just the amount of courage that it took for them to continue on this journey over and over again through generations. You know, it's like, well, my grandpa did this and my great great grandpa did this and I get to do it too, you know. So it's a lot more to think about than just these pages just make it seem so easy to gloss over. I feel like you just like read it, you're like, what a nice story, you know. But it's like, no.
Yes. You can't even imagine what it would have been like to be dragged, probably in chains, out of the capital city. Now you're going to cross over the river it was a historic place. So when they cross over, what does Joshua do? He stops and he builds a little monument right there. He always builds a tabernacle. Very common tradition. When you stop something, you make a tabernacle for God. So they're going to get dragged back across the river that they had to fight to get through, and now they're in Babylon. Now they're going to have to come back across that river again. And what are the things that happen when they come back across the river again? So then it becomes a different story. So this is after the second fall of the temple. Now they've come back, they've rebuilt Jerusalem, they've rebuilt the temple. Now the river is another historic site because that's where John goes and baptizes people. Same river. And he's out there, okay, you guys, let's see if we can get this right. We will build the temple. Can you guys please get this right? Come out here and once again, pledge yourself to God. Cleanse yourself in this river, pledge yourself to God. And where does Jesus get baptized? The Jordan River. So that river, that 233-mile river, has just such huge significance to them. It's a historic crossing at least twice.
Right.
Got pulled in, thrown out, go back in.
Gosh dang, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, Jesus was baptized there. He did a lot of healings there. It's a rather really important river, body of water. So then I was thinking about that because I just love the etymology of words. So I was thinking about, well, what does Jerusalem mean? And so I had to look this one up. So it's two words. It's a compound word, and there's no J in Hebrew. So it's Yeru and then Salem. And Yeru means flow like a river, but it also means flow like moving you to something important, Jerusalem. And then the second part of that is actually the Hebrew word that we say shalom. I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's like shalayim, A-I-M. And then we pronounce it as shalom, meaning peace. But it's a river pulling you towards what?
Peace.
So we interpret the word shalom to mean peace, but in the Hebrew tradition, it more accurately meant I'm moving you more towards completeness. And when we feel complete and we're peace, we have peace. So Jerusalem is pulling you or pointing you towards completeness and peace. So the name has such power, and they would have understood that this was a compound word and it meant these two things. Right. Fascinating.
That's crazy. That's so cool.
And Jerusalem isn't far from Bethlehem. So Beth, house, lamb, bread, Bethlehem, house of bread. Where was Jesus, the bread of life?
Bread of life.
Born in Bethlehem, not too far from the river that pulls you towards peace and completeness, right? Fascinating.
I was literally about to, okay. So this answers my mental question. I was about to ask, I was like, so why did Jesus like come in, you know, in what is now Iraq and the Middle East and all of that? Why didn't he come in like Persia or some other place? And it's like, well, that is why.
Well, it's just like you said, it's all orchestrated by God. So go all the way back. You go back and Jesus quotes Isaiah, and Isaiah is saying, Isaiah actually made a reference to the area of Nazareth, and that out of that area will something good and powerful and just come. You So way up there, what good comes out of
Right.
Nazareth?
Yeah. It's like, what are you talking about?
Hundreds of years before Jesus
you
showed
fool.
up.
Yeah.
Isaiah, something good will come out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have not known all those stories.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm going to check every single block so you guys know that I'm the real deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in this city, in this city, in this city, in this city, so you guys know I know what the scripture says because I am the fulfillment of the scripture. Mm-hmm.
Well, meeting them where they're at. I mean, you see that so many times. There's this conversation I've had several times where people are like, well, the Old Testament God is like this big, bad, meanie God, and they go off and whatever. And they're like, and then the New Testament God is like, he's all gentle and kind and whatever. And it's like, well, you have, once again, the whole purpose of what we're doing here is establishing what was the culture, what was the time, what was the geography, what was the symbolism, and all of that. And it's like, well, they were a hard-hearted people. Mm-hmm. So God was meeting them where they were at. And so for all of these prophecies to be laid out and then all of the boxes to be checked, it was for him to symbolically slap them with obviousness as to this is the Messiah. This is who was promised to you. Now listen to him.
Yes. So that's a perfect example. So the God of the Old Testament versus the God in the New Testament. So before we get to the Testament or the covenant with Jesus, mm-hmm. they're all wanting to call him Son of David, Son of David, Son of David. But that's the older covenant, which was, and we start with you'll have a couple, then you'll have a family, then you'll have a tribe, then you'll have a nation, then you'll have a kingdom. Mm-hmm. So we hit David and we get the kingdom. And Jesus comes back and that new covenant doesn't have to do with power the way they see power. It doesn't have to do with earthly goods the way that we see it. So when they're calling him the Son of David, does he come from that family lineage? Yes. But this isn't a God who says, I'm going to give you a kingdom. This is the God who says the kingdom is within you. And you see, because he does the example of the temple, if you destroy this temple, I will raise it again in 3 days. And they're not getting that he's not talking about that palatial, incredible building.
Right, the actual temple.
Okay, you guys, God isn't living in that temple. God is with you, and I'm here to remind you that you are the temple. Mm-hmm. Take this idea everywhere with you. God isn't in a place, and to them, you had to go to Jerusalem to pray because that's where the temple was. And Jesus, everything he's doing is saying, the temple of God is within you. It's your Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. I can take this temple anywhere I go and reach everybody. Go to the ends of the earth. Yeah. It's just not, God isn't in a big, huge complex. Yeah. Not there. Right. It's in you.
His whole, I just had like a big aha moment. Like his whole existence and like purpose of coming to earth was to illustrate, among other things, human dignity. Like how much he wants you to understand what a gift your humanness is, your body, right? So it's like, yes, he's fully divine and all of that, but he's like, no, the body is good. That's and if you think about the culture back then, like how are they treating their bodies? Oh, like what was your humanity, right? It was not at all how we see it now as Catholics, right? And the whole teaching about God uniting with you fully, and that whole idea was heretical in a way for them, right? Oh, yes. Because they didn't. The priests were only allowed to go into the temple at a certain time, and you could only go so far in the temple, and like God was, and so for him to be like no, and to tear that veil like later, right, way down the road, but for that veil to tear and him be like, this temple honestly is nothing compared to what you are. Mm-hmm. That was his whole spiel.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you said that, I actually got the chills. So I will tear the veil. Anybody can come before God and pray. Mm-hmm. So I kept thinking about that because somebody brought this up in one of our Bible studies, and I've heard that same argument, and I've had the same argument inside myself for decades about the God of the Old Testament. It doesn't make any sense. That's an angry, vindictive God. And the God of Jesus, he calls Daddy. Mm-hmm. So he had all these other names for God, and he shows up and calls God Daddy, right? That's how close he is to God. I call you Daddy. But God is not in that temple. God isn't on a throne far, far away in a kingdom. Okay, let me get that whole concept of earthly goods and earthly wealth and power let me just tear that whole thing apart. I'm born in poverty in a part of the country where the bad people were, the people who fell away from the true faith. I was born here, but then we moved up here where the people who fell away from the truth are, and then I worked my way back down, worked my way back up. I'm just going to go back and forth here because everybody's welcome. I'm going to build a path from the north to the south, from good to bad, from Gentile to Jew. I'm building a path. I am the way. And here's the fascinating thing. So there's that great song we always sing at Christmas time about straighten the paths. I heard this. I don't remember who the priest was, but I was listening to Salt and Light Radio, and one of the priests was talking about what does that mean, make straight the paths. But in their time, when somebody powerful like a king or a prince was coming, they would actually clear the road. They would fill in the holes.
Right.
Sometimes they'd actually make a completely different road, so it was easier for the king and his chariots and all his people to go through. So when we hear Isaiah saying, clear the pathways, make straight the pathways of the Lord, it's like actually clear the way. I need to clear this pathway because you guys keep getting off it or you don't understand the pathway, and I am the way.
Yeah. Let me illustrate this very clearly for you.
I am the way.
Yeah.
Follow me. You don't need that road over there because it's leading you to nothing.
Yeah. Unity.
Yeah.
Absolute unity. And what's great, okay, I'm going to go off for another second. Hold on. So, unity scientifically, biologically, because that's what the Eucharist is. And that's what gets me, I guess, right? Because we're all looking for, I have this whole philosophy about how to explain religion and like why you should follow it and blah, 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 whatever. Which, another podcast, different time. But in my philosophy, I like to go off on like science, and I'll take pieces of science, and I like to use logic a lot and like reasoning and syllogisms and kind of that whole thing to tie to faith. That's usually how I go about conversations with people who are not Catholic or whatever. So when I talk about the sacraments, I really focus on what does that do for us as human beings. Let's kind of take like the divine out of it for a second and the spiritual, right? So what happens when you eat something, right? Well, you are what you eat is not just like some cute colloquialism. You literally cellularly become what you eat. So if we take that principle, right, which has been proven and tested to be true, if we take that scientific principle and we apply it to the Eucharist, then God is literally cellularly uniting himself with you.
Yes.
And he wants to be that close to you. So for Christ to come and his whole thing to be talking about unity and beauty of the human body, right? And for him to sacrifice that for us and then be like, and now I want you to be fully united with me using your human science, right?
Yeah.
It just...
Yeah.
So to look at the Old Testament and for them to be so separated from God and their ideology and the idea of I cannot be close to God, is sad to me, honestly. Like, thank you, God, for me being born now. Yes. And in like, I guess we're considered still the New Testament time rather than the Old Testament, because he wants to have a relationship. And some people even describe it as a romantic kind of relationship, which I think is an interesting principle. It's kind of a hard one to get through. But still, just unity and universality of the faith is such a gift to have, as compared to let's put up a veil, let's put up a wall, let's put up a grate, let's put up a, clothing. They like specific clothing that they had to wear, and all of that.
Well, that one goes back, if you take that whole concept of how close are you to God versus how far away are you from God. So if you go back to when Abraham makes his covenant, God is far away. When Moses makes his covenant, it's just him. And everybody else is at the base of this gargantuan mountain. And there's lightning and flash and everything. And they're terrified because you don't want to get too close to that God, because when that God shows up, there's an earthquake and there's fire and there's lightning.
It's scary. Yeah.
I don't want to be close to God. So you can certainly understand why over time, it just became more and more formalized. Only certain people can get that close to God. And then Jesus says, no, you can come right here. Let the kids sit on my lap.
Yeah.
I'll talk to women. Anybody is welcome. You can get this close. Here, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Be in my bubble.
Yeah. It's amazing because that other God of the Old Testament, please keep far away just because you're scary. And then you move forward, and I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am this close to you. Doesn't matter where you are geographically. I am this close to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
we went off there, folks, but good stuff. So what are we going to be talking about next time?
I would actually love to circle back to the covenants and look at the covenants of the Old Testament and then the covenant, the New Testament, Jesus' covenant, and go through how they kind of build off each other, and then how Jesus comes and changes the nature of the covenant, because it really ties back into how close you get to God. In this covenant, like you just said, you are right there with God. You are in communion, taking communion in the Eucharist. God's right here in this last covenant, right here.
Awesome. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening and watching. We will be diving into that stuff next time. I know you're so excited, but you'll have to wait till next week. Please follow Salt and Light Catholic Radio. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can find our website, www.saltandlightcatholicradio.com, and YouTube, same thing, Salt and Light Radio Boise. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay. God bless.